Welcome to the first episode of the We Can Ball podcast, your podcast for all things Canada basketball as we lead up to the FIBA World Cup later this month. Scott and I, who are on this podcast, will be there. Jonathan Chen, obviously, kind of the amazing writer for Raptors Republic, covering everything Canada basketball, is on this podcast as well. And then we're also alongside Matty Ireland, the host of the Canada Hoops podcast, which is an amazing podcast that everyone should check out. So I've kind of assembled the dream team of Canadian hoops heads for this podcast. So especially just for the inaugural and the first one. So thanks guys for coming on. I really appreciate it. And this should be a pretty exciting couple weeks.
Absolutely.
I want to first kind of get into it just with regards to this might be the most talented team Canada's ever assembled. What do you guys think? Like, is this the best team, and how excited should fans be for this team?
I'll jump in, I guess, off the bat. I do think this is the best team Canada's ever assembled. I don't think it's really questionable. Really, the only one that's in comparison is the 2021 Victoria Olympic qualifier team. There I think you're taking out. Most importantly, you're probably taking out Andrew Wiggins and Trey Lyles. Here you're adding Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Kelly Olynyk, some other pieces. But I'm under the huge belief that Kelly Olynyk's one of our best FIBA players, top 3-4 players. Shai is probably our best. So you add those guys in there and the surrounding talent. I think this is easily the most talented team Canada's ever assembled.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I think just looking at like the NBA players on the roster or like on the exhibition roster, it's around 7 NBA players, and when you go down the list, and it's not like the Michael Mulder NBA talent type of players, which he's still kind of in the G League and trying to make it happen, but it's like legitimate rotational NBA players, basically all across the board. And so, yeah, I think I would definitely agree with Scott that it's definitely one of, if not the most talented team. And I know a lot of people are disappointed with some of the dropouts. But yeah, like I think when we watched the qualifiers last summer with the summer core, just seeing a couple of glimpses of the SGA and Kelly Olynyk core, which is what I've been kind of dubbing it. Yeah, no, I'm totally on board, and I think it's a really talented team for sure.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so just you can jump in, Matty, if you want.
No, I just think it's, like there was talk of that in 2015, the Olympic qualifier. Like that was at that time the best team ever assembled. Players that you talked to, I remember Robert Zachary telling me that. And then they had a tough situation there, and then 2 summers ago with the Victoria, like Scott said, and now we add SGA, our best player, and he's leading the way, and that says a lot. And the duo of him and Kelly is what we need. It is very special. Outstanding FIBA player that Kelly is. Yeah, and I know like the Jamal thing not being available now, that would have bumped the team even higher, but this is still a really good team. We've heard people mention, just as a lethal group potentially. They seem to be improving with every game together. Yeah, no question, the best team ever for the senior men's national team for Canada basketball.
And with that, like, why, like, for people that don't know about kind of international basketball or just coming to this because Shai is on the team or they see RJ or they love Dylan Brooks's antics, like, why should people care about the FIBA World Cup? And obviously it has implications for the Olympics. So maybe I know Scott's very passionate about why the FIBA World Cup's really an important deal and bigger than the Olympics, but just give us a little bit of why it's so important and what kind of comes out of this tournament as well.
Yeah. I know this is tough to convince North Americans, but I think it's a better tournament than the Olympics. It's just everybody's here. Now, in terms of nations, it's 32 teams. It's most of the best teams in the world, almost all top 20 ranked FIBA teams. There's a few missing like Russia and Poland and Argentina. For the Olympics, you kind of just have 12 teams. You're usually missing a handful of teams in the top 5 or 6 in the world. It's a very brief tournament. It's just, I know that all the eyes are on that. You tend to get, bigger turnout from Team USA stars. But the World Cup usually has, a good complement of NBA stars. We've seen a few fall off this year, but it's a grind. This is a hard thing to win. Multiple rounds. You're going to face a lot of good teams. And I just think it's a tougher test on any national team.
And kind of like with that, like just like let's lay out a little bit about the Olympic qualifying, because I know a lot of people do care, even though it goes against you a bit, Scott. But like, I mean, I can just outline a little bit of how the Olympics work or how the FIBA World Cup acts as a qualifier for the Olympics for Canada. So just so people that don't know, is that the top 2 teams from the Americas in this tournament, that basically being every team from North and South America, so like Dominican, Puerto Rico, Brazil, Canada, USA, the top 2 teams at the end of this tournament, like ranking. So if Canada comes 10th and the US comes 2nd, and no team from the Dominican and the rest of them is better than 10th, then Canada makes the Olympics, right? So they don't need to medal. They don't need to even make the quarterfinals, although that would probably help their cause. And so they're in a group with France, Lebanon, and Latvia. So obviously France won the silver medal in Tokyo. They have a lot of good players, so that'll be a tough game. Latvia, it doesn't have Porzingis, but they're still a good European team, so it's going to be tough. And then in the second round, if they are to make it, they'd probably play Spain, who they just played today and beat, but that was by no means an easy win. And there's a crossover group, which is a bit confusing, and we maybe get to it a bit later, but if Canada were to be top 2 in their original group, in Group H, they'd go into another group, basically with the 2 winners from Group G, which is probably Spain, maybe Brazil as well. And then those Canada would play, for example, Spain and Brazil. And then if they were to be top 2 out of those remaining teams, probably France as well from their own group, then they'd make the quarterfinals. So yeah, just to make the quarters is a bit confusing, but there you go. And if Canada goes deep in this tournament, other than probably the US, they have, the best team at this tournament. But maybe someone can talk about why the draw isn't as favorable for Canada as it could be.
Yeah, I'll touch on that quickly. But I think we saw the draw unfolding from a mile away when Canada was chosen to be hosted by Jakarta. Each host country, Indonesia, Japan, Manila, was able to select a team to kind of host, and that just kind of set things in motion for Canada to get a pretty tough draw. Ended up pretty close to as tough as it could have been. We were going to get Spain or Australia in that other pool. We ended up with Spain. We were going to get somebody like France or Serbia in our first pool. We ended up with France. And the big problem here is Spain's number 1 ranked team in the world. France is number 3. Very, very highly likely we're going to have to beat one of those teams just to make it to the quarterfinals. And to throw another fly in the ointment, Latvia is in our first round pool, and is probably one of the more underranked teams in this tournament. They went 11-1 through qualifying, beating Greece, Serbia, Turkey. They have a good team, and they live and die by the 3, so they certainly have a puncher's chance against Canada. So tough draw, but this team I think can do it.
And I just want to ask kind of Matty and Jonathan, like, what do you make, because it's topical, and I know this will be the last time we talk about people that aren't playing for Canada at this tournament, but Jamal Murray did kind of drop out of the team in the past couple of days. Matty or Jonathan, like, what do you make of that, and how likely do you think he'll ever play for Canada if they are to make the Olympics? Like, what do you just make of the whole situation?
I think I think Scott and I talked about this real quick on an episode we had, but it looked good that he was going to do it, even just because they did win in Denver, I thought, as Scott had mentioned, that this was going to be something positive for his chances, maybe feeling good energy. But I think, should we qualify for the Olympics, just because the hype with that type of tournament and the games, I think we could see Jamal there next season, right? So he shows up to camp. You were there, Alex. You were getting a feel for things. Discussion of he's not sure what he's going to do, and then just by not him making the trip to Germany initially, I mean, I felt like it wasn't going to happen, and then there was optimism that he might play in Spain. I think he does want to play. I think he was just being smart. There was a lot of medical advice from the Nuggets on this as well, along with Canada basketball. And Canada basketball wants to do right by Jamal as well. So not really surprised, with respect to what you mentioned about not really talking about players that aren't here. I think most of us have tried to focus more on the group that is and celebrate them. And like we've said, it's a really good team. But I think Jamal is bought in on the program. And might be able to allude to this. It seemed like he enjoyed being around the guys in Toronto. I wouldn't lose hope on him. I'd feel better about Jamal playing next summer as opposed to some other guys. That's where I'll leave that for now.
Well, I have a funny little nugget from training camp a couple weeks ago, is because Jamal was scheduled to come to or be available to the media on the Wednesday, and he was shooting right in front of us, and he was the last person to come to us, and you see him right before kind of his time to come on. Everyone else had done their media rounds. He's shooting, and then he just runs out of the gym, and you see the communications guy run after him, and then he comes back maybe like 10 minutes later, and everyone there is like, is he gonna even speak to the media? And he was very coy with his questions. I think Josh Lewenberg of TSN asked him, like, are you gonna play? And he's like, oh, it's a process, right? He didn't say, yes, I'm gonna be there. So I think once that kind of press conference happened, I felt pretty pessimistic. And I did a bit of digging, and I listened to Brian Windhorst, and I'm pretty sure Jamal Murray's up for an extension right now of 3 times 144. So if Denver's holding that as a nugget, no pun intended, for Jamal, I can see why that might be hard for him to come. So that's kind of the last one who's not here, because I think all of us, like, this team's so exciting just to have a guy like Shai, Kelly, RJ, who's been amazing. I always love Lou Dort as well, and the others. It's like this team should be really fun to watch, and as you guys said, it might be the best team Canada's ever put on the floor. But for people that might not know this team as well, like, what are some of the guys that might not be household names for Canada that people should be kind of excited to watch? I think Jonathan does his deep dives all the time, so he's probably best to answer this.
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. And so my player is going to be a guy that I've been pretty high on and kind of been pushing this agenda on Twitter the last couple of weeks. And he's actually one of the few non-NBA players on the team. And so I would go with Kyle Alexander. And so he's 6'11", big, with I think it was a 7'2" wingspan, I think. So it's very similar measurements to Jaren Jackson Jr., who is like an incredible defensive player, probably one of the best in the NBA up there. And so he's not quite the defender that Jaren Jackson Jr. is, but his main kind of draw is rim protection and mobility and agility, so he can kind of play a little bit more on the perimeter. And I think he just offers something that all the other bigs on Canada this summer are kind of lacking. When you look at, Olynyk, who doesn't, have the quickest foot speed, Powell, who's a little bit smaller on the smaller end and not quite as effective at the rim, and then Edie, who's also a little slower, although he is really huge and tall. So I think in some moments, and especially if it's like you need a one stop on a possession, I think Kyle Alexander is the best suited big man on the team. to kind of anchor Canada's defense. And we kind of already saw it in the exhibition games. He had a couple like really nice recoveries, flipping his hips, and pick and roll drop. I think there was one really impressive one down the stretch against Germany when he blocked Tice. So yeah, I think that would be my player to watch, especially if you're not too familiar, because I think he'll play a big role on the team.
Yeah. I think for me, I think your listeners are going to be familiar with the NBA players. So, as Jonathan said, Kyle Alexander is kind of the number one non-NBA player for me for people to watch. I think he's our kind of backup center, and we'll be leaned on for real minutes here. But so will Melvin Ejim and Traybell Haynes. I think we're lacking with some of these dropouts with Corey Joseph and Kevin Pangos. We're really lacking that kind of backup ball handler, and that's Traybell Haynes. And he's got some real pros and cons to his game, but he's now a multi-year vet with the senior men's national team, the Winter Corps. They've been playing at a pretty high level in Europe, and people should be familiar with Melvin Ejim, who's been kind of a long-term stalwart of the senior men's national team. He's getting a little bit up there in age, but he's kind of that good kind of combo power forward, small forward, jack of all trades, a little bit more defensive, do the kind of dirty work, hit down some open shots type of guy. But those would be the three I'd point out.
Yeah, Alex, I think for me, I'm a Melvin fan. He's joined me, and this is a roster now where Mel doesn't have to do too much, right? Limited minutes, but he's an experienced player, a vet. Come in, make a few dirty plays, make a few key plays. So Melvin is a guy that may be counted on in a crucial situation. But because of the depth of this team and loaded up front with the NBA guys, Mel can come in and play a quick, positive role.
No, I definitely agree. I think for the NBA players, the one that I think people should watch is Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I think just he hasn't really made it out or kind of spread his wings in the NBA for maybe the talent wise. He's kind of been a bit middling and up and down, and he's been on, I think, 3 teams now. So, but for Canada, he's been amazing. He's a really good playmaker. He's a good shooter. He's a decent defender. He's just someone that kind of pops out when you watch him for Canada, and he's been really good for Canada every time he's suited up in 21 and in last summer and this year so far in the friendly. So that's someone that you might not have heard of, and obviously he's cousins with Shai, so that's always a really cool dynamic. And yeah, but to go to Shai, just what kind of confidence does a player like that bring to you? Like, what do you think it brings to this team, and especially like late in games? Like, they just have a guy who was first team All NBA. And what have you thought of him so far, just in the friendlies, where he's been up and down, but still obviously really good?
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in on this one. So I think obviously Shai is probably the most talented player to play for the national team since Steve Nash. And yeah, so just having that kind of talent and also kind of creation ability on the team from the perimeter is something that just has been missing on national teams or on our national team for years. And I think so. I haven't watched the Spain game yet, but I did rewatch the 2 Germany games, and the New Zealand game was kind of a wash to me. But I think if you kind of just look at the box score and like his shooting efficiency, you kind of look at it and you might think, oh, you might have some concerns. And I think, those concerns, are valid because he didn't play amazing. But I think one of the underrated aspects of it was just how much defensive attention Germany was giving him. So I had a kind of a tweet with a couple screenshots from the other day about it. But they were, even if it was like a spread pick and roll where Canada was trying to go 5 out space, as much space as possible, and have just that high pick and roll at the top or at the elbow area. Germany was bringing an extra guy, even helping off of Kelly Olynyk, who's a fantastic elite shooter. Like they didn't care. They were gonna plug the gaps. They were gonna bring three. They were gonna show Shai a wall. And I think that is partly one of the reasons, obviously, why he struggled shooting the ball. And I think also he just missed some of the shots as well in the second Germany game mainly. But even in those games where he's struggling, that amount of defensive attention, that's going to create advantages. It opens up things for other players. It forces the defense to rotate. And so, I know he's been at the top of these kind of advanced stats about advantage creation in the NBA for years, but I think it's like very, very obvious just watching these few games, and it's like a huge difference compared to the last couple of iterations.
Yeah, I don't want to be a spoiler for you, Jonathan, but talking about today's Spain game, I just got a feeling that I don't think I've had for a long time, where it's a tie game, 10, 15 seconds on the clock. It's in Shai's hands. And he goes up against some pretty good Spanish D, attempts to drive, gets that shut down, kind of pivots, turns, and gives himself a clean look. I thought I was going in. That's the first time in a while. I'm like, yeah, it's in Shai's hands. We got this. Ball's going in. Didn't, but that's the first time I think I felt that way in a long time.
No, like for sure. I was watching too, and like he had a bunch of shots in the game today that were just back rim where everything felt good. And, sometimes that's just the way it goes. But I think that is something that it brings to this team, is just the level of confidence late in games. Like they just won these 2 games against Germany and Spain in overtime, and he really led the charge. I mean, RJ Barrett did too, and RJ's been really phenomenal. I'm kind of thinking, like, why hasn't he been like this for the Knicks, like this consistently? Because every game he's played well for Canada, at least so far in the friendlies. But just having a player like that at the end of the game, you really feel comfortable that if Canada is not blown out at the end of any of these games, or like down 12, they're down 4 or 5 points with 3-4 minutes left, you really feel they have a chance because they have someone like that. And you look at Spain, and it was harder for them to kind of create good offense at the end of that game right today. And look, as same with Germany, especially with Schroeder out, it was a bit harder for them to create because they don't have a player of Shai's caliber. But for this team, like just going forward to the tournament, what's the battle for them in terms of talent? Because they have obviously 7 NBA players, Shai, RJ, and Kelly, but the fact that they just have never really played extended periods of time together. Like, what is that battle between the talent versus chemistry, and how can maybe in this case the talent come on the right side, and Canada does well, even though they have a bit of lack of chemistry?
Yeah, sure. I think just looking through these first couple exhibition games, the starting group of Shai, RJ, Brooks, Kelly, and Dwight Powell, aside from like that first Germany game where it was like that first time they were ever playing together, I think they've looked amazing. I'll have to dig into like the plus minus numbers of their lineup, and of course it's a small sample size, but I think those 5 players make up probably our most talented like lineup, if not one of the most talented. And we're seeing against these stronger teams, European teams, and even though they're just exhibition games, we're seeing that they can dominate, or they can open up nice leads, and they can play. They can create offense with Shai and RJ as a kind of a secondary creator, with Kelly as a playmaking hub. Their defense can be a lot better with Dylan Brooks at the point of attack. And so I think just from the starting lineup perspective, I think Canada's talent will definitely win them a lot of minutes, or even just games even. But I think where it kind of gets a little more dicey is once you kind of go down the depth chart and you're looking at the bench unit, which doesn't have quite as much NBA talent, but also still has those like kind of chemistry issues, although probably a little better because some of the Euro players and the Winter core are more familiar with each other. But we're seeing that they're kind of struggling. So I think it's a balance, and hopefully, we can just get Shai, RJ, and Kelly out there for as many minutes as possible, and just kind of win with the the talent that we have.
You go, Matt.
No, I just to add, like I don't think head coach Jordy Fernandez has shown a lot right now. I think they have an idea of how they want to play minutes come the start on the 25th against France. Jonathan, is speaking on it just in terms of starters, and I feel like they'll play a lot more heavy minutes. And I don't think we're going to see a lot of the bottom men hit the floor unless they need to. With hopefully we can avoid injuries, but if you go 7 with the 7 NBA guys, and then you bring in like Melvin and then Kyle Alexander and Zach maybe for your depth. I just don't think some other guys are going to see the floor that much. They're seeing it right now in exhibition for a reason, get some chemistry and some continuity and just get some familiarity. But I think if everyone's healthy, it has the team has a chance to do something special. Definitely get out of the group and get into that new group. And we got to lean. Shea spoke up and said, "I want to lead this program. He's our guy. He's our best player, right?" So, I think he gives a lot of confidence to the rest of the guys on the team because like they all know each other. They see each other in the NBA, but they know at that level, like you can't tell me that RJ and Dylan are looking around and Kelly too and saying like, "Okay, we're in the league. We know what it's like, and this guy's our leader, and he's all NBA." Like he made a play today. Like he came in the second quarter after just being out for a few minutes, and without spoiling it too much, Jonathan just off the top, off a roll, easy layup to the rim, and he just kind of looked around like he looked at Spain like, "This is it. This is what you guys got." Like that's Shea, right? So I feel good about what they're going to do in this tournament. I honestly do.
No, it's funny. He got fouled on a N1 and he just screamed, "Make the like effing layup" or something. And it was a kind of hard N1. And
Right.
I thought that was funny, but you can see how kind of determined he was. And he missed a couple kind of layups or in the Spain game that he got fouled on, and he got really pissed at himself, which is always kind of cool to see. But for this Canada team, like what kind of style of play do you think will be a successful one for them? Maybe Jonathan and Scott, like if this team's to be successful, like how do you see them playing? Is it fast pace? Is it trying to force turnovers? Do you see any differences between the way Canada's playing now compared to under Nick Nurse, under now with Jordy Fernandez? Just talk about like the kind of style of play of this Canadian team that you'd like to see in Jakarta.
Yeah, I'll be quick and pass this over to Jonathan because he's the X's and O's guy. But what I'm seeing is I'm kind of looking at the opponents too, and Canada has such an advantage at the guard and wing spots over Latvia, France. We even saw it today with Spain, right? There's no Ricky Rubio. Some of their more wily vets are a little bit too old to really contribute. They're running a 19-year-old, starting point guard in Nunez and, a backup point guard in Diaz who has I don't think he has an offensive bone in his body, right? He's a defensive point guard. So I'd like to see that kind of pressure on these guards. It's the same thing with France, right? There's not really a natural point guard there with France. They're running with combo guards and shooting guards. I'd really love to see that kind of. I want to see the torture chamber. I want to see Brooks up in people's face. A little disappointed today just to see kind of Brooks just get all just bushwhacked with touch fouls. I think he had like 4 of them, like crap, no nothing fouls because he's putting 2 hands on guys. So he's got to figure things out real quick. But I'd love to kind of see that pressure up front and keep pushing with the wings and the guards we have. But I don't know, Jonathan, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think definitely agree on the defensive side. I'm just being kind of playing a lot more aggressive and kind of high pressure on the perimeter because I think other than Kyle Alexander, the bigs and the rim protection is probably one of the weaker parts of Canada's defense. And because of like our personnel, we're gonna have to kind of make up for that with perimeter defense. And it's a good thing because we have Dylan Brooks, Lou Dort, who are fantastic point of attack defenders, and they're kind of both really good screen navigators in their own unique ways. Because Lou Dort he just draws offensive fouls and he just falls down and then it's an offensive foul at least once a game. And then Dylan, he has this like weird little chicken wing technique that he uses to kind of bounce off of the screen with his off arm. But yeah, so I think defensively, just being as aggressive as possible on the perimeter, because you're going to need a way to kind of stop teams from getting into the paint. And given the athleticism on the team and the length, it's definitely a possibility. Offensively, I think Jordi Fernandez is definitely, with the Sacramento Kings, the #1 offense in NBA history last year in terms of offensive rating. I don't know how big of a part he played in it, but as a lead assistant coach, he probably played, a substantial part at minimum. And yeah, I'd say so far, in the exhibition games, you can't show everything, of course. But yeah, I think I've been feeling pretty good about it. I think while I was watching kind of the second Germany game, I was a little iffy because, just looking at Shai's numbers, it was looking like, oh, he was missing a lot of shots. He was going through a lot of traffic. But I think after rewatching a lot of these games, I've felt a lot better about Jordi Fernandez and kind of his proactive kind of adjustment making throughout the games. So like offensively, kind of referencing the tweet that I had earlier. So I was talking about how they had the spread pick and roll and how Germany was kind of helping off of Kelly Olynyk to kind of basically bring a third defender in to stop Shai's dribble penetration. So the next time Canada played Germany, we saw a lot more kind of flat pick and rolls where, you have two people, Shai and the big who's doing the pick and roll at the top, and then you have the three players like below or near the baseline. So they can't bring that extra third defender, or even if they do, it's like there's so much more space for Shai to attack. And so I think the way I kind of phrased it was like sacrificing the spacing of the off-ball players to maximize the spacing for Shai. And he had so many other adjustments in that game. Like as much as I don't love it so much for defense, but playing Kelly at the 5, that helps also with spacing for Shai. And then defensively, I thought compared to Nick Nurse, there's not quite the same amount of, janky zone defenses and different looks. But, there's definitely some adjustments that he was making. I think one of them was Kelly was just getting shredded in the pick and roll as the big. And, in the fourth quarter, there were sometimes, they subbed Kelly out and they went 5 wings, switch everything. Kind of like the Raptors, 6'9" vision almost. But then there was a couple possessions where Kelly was in, but instead of guarding the big, he's guarding I don't know how to pronounce his name, but it was like a German guard who was like it was like their movement shooter. And so Kelly was guarding this like 6'3", 6'4" guard. So he's not in the pick and roll. And then Dylan is sliding up and guarding the 4 so they can just switch the pick and roll with Schroeder. So I think so far I've been pretty impressed and pretty happy with everything that Jordy's been doing. And I know it's kind of a tight schedule, a tight turnaround. So, it's not going to be the most in-depth offensive playbook. But yeah, I think so far I've been pretty happy.
And with that for kind of Scott and Matt, like, what are you guys like? I don't want to be the pessimist, but what things kind of concern you, or what are you maybe a bit worried about with this team?
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I think we've kind of touched on this already. There's very limited rim protection. You kind of saw that today in Spain's game. If they're kind of getting into the paint and Dwight Powell's trying to protect the rim, it's usually a made layup. But some of the other concerns, like I said, I think I sure hope Shai doesn't get in foul trouble. That's going to be a big problem. We're still trying to figure out the bench and how those pieces fit together. We saw Zach Edey in there today, and I thought it looked a little chaotic. Some people liked it. Matty was saying maybe he just stands out so much. Things look good when something good happens, but there's still some kind of worry amongst the bench rotation. And this hasn't been a problem so far, but we've talked about this before this team was assembled, was the 3-point shooting. So these are just not known good 3-point shooters when you have Lou Dort and Dylan Brooks and even RJ Barrett. Barrett can be streaky, and when he goes streaky, it seems like he's good for a month and then he's off for a month. So hopefully we got him on a good month. I think we've shot over 40% from three so far in these exhibitions. Barrett's looked great. Dylan Brooks has been making, proper shot selections and hitting his threes, I think at a good rate. Lou Dort, maybe not so much. Nikhil's been pretty decent. So hopefully that holds up. But those are kind of the things that are kind of swirling in my head.
I think number one for me is the 3-point shooting. I just feel like we just don't have that guy right now, unless RJ's in his hot month. That's going to just knock something down off, a Shai and Kelly screen, and Shai drives and dishes to somebody. Like, who's going to hit that big wing three, baseline three? And I had kind of been thinking, like, had Corey gone, wouldn't it have been like iconic if, because Corey's become a better 3-point shooter, if Shai would have dribble drive, kicked it to Corey hits a winner, Captain Canada, because even Corey would have been a guy that could contribute that way. So the lack of outside shooting right now concerns me. But we got to get into the tournament and just see where it goes. But hopefully that's not an issue that hurts us in a game.
No, I mean, I agree with what everyone said. I talk about the playmaking a little bit. I think after, like, Shai's a good playmaker, not a great playmaker. I like Nikhil. He's a good playmaker, but they don't really have a guy that can really just kind of create a lot of shots, easy shots for other people. Like, Shai does by a product of just being such a good offensive player and drawing so much attention. But he is a good passer, but that's what I think Murray would have brought to this team. Even just Joseph as like another ball handler, as we talked about. So I'm a bit worried about that. But if RJ Barrett is playing the way he is, I'm not too worried. But yeah, what do you make about RJ Barrett? Because he's been so good in these games so far. Is this something you think is consistent, like that he'll maintain at least some level? He's not going to consistently be 13 of 14 from the field like against Germany in that second game. But is this something where he just takes his game up another level when it comes to playing for Canada? Because he played really well in 2021 as well. And yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'll take the first crack at this one. Yeah, I think RJ, some of his like kind of standout skills kind of work really well with the FIBA game from a kind of just an individual perspective. So I think with RJ, he's always been a really kind of broad shoulders, strong player, and especially in the NBA, his kind of main source of scoring and creation is to kind of drive and bump people, absorb contact, bump people, and then throw up the layup with the left hand off glass. And yeah, so I think that kind of, and we've seen it so far already so many times in the exhibition games where he's gets downhill, he picks up the dribble, bumps once or twice, bumps a defender, and then he goes up and the touch has been there. So I think just from that perspective and with how much more physical FIBA is, I think relying on strength-based creation is the way to go, especially for RJ at least. And I think in terms of like the improved like 3-point shooting, like obviously nobody knows if it's real yet or not, just based on small sample size. But I know there's like a thread or like a YouTube video that I watched a couple weeks ago from, I think his name is like Prez on Twitter. He's like a really smart Knicks account and an analyst. But he was basically talking about RJ was kind of tweaking his form a little. And yeah, I think maybe we'll put up a graphic and we'll show it. But the idea behind that is RJ, his form has gone to where like his left shoulder, like when he's about to like shoot, it's like a lot more flat. It's like a lot more 90 degrees. And then he brings the ball up like right under his elbow, or sorry, his eyebrow now, or like near his forehead. And that's been like a change that he's been making this summer. And I mean, so far it looks good. And even compared to just last year where he was kind of struggling shooting from three, he was kind of bringing the ball up a lot higher before he released it. So it wasn't kind of that 90 degree for his like his elbow angle. And so I think if those kind of shot mechanic changes are legit, then maybe this is RJ's 3-point shooting and how good he is now. But yeah, so I think the main thing is I think RJ's individual skills kind of fit for FIBA.
Other than maybe Shai as like, but on just as being an X factor, like what player do you think is kind of the most impactful for Canada if they're going to go deep in this tournament that isn't maybe a Shai or an RJ?
Easy answer for me, it's Kelly. Like I said, I'm just a huge FIBA fan. He does what our guards and wings need, right? He's a 3-point shooting threat. So this FIBA paint is packed, and at least he's helping draw somebody out of there with that. But he's such a good playmaker. He's good dribble drive. He actually led the team with assists today. He had 6 assists.
Him and Powell were just going crazy.
Yeah, great chemistry between him and Powell finishing. It looked Kelly looked like Luka out there. So he's got to bring it, and then defensive plays as well. He had a couple stops, couple blocks, key rebounds. He is hugely important for this team to do well.
Yeah, I agree with Scott. And Kelly is a guy that's always played for the program. It matters to him. I think we can probably label him Captain Canada for this current team right now. And he just creates so much space, and he's just a heady player. He's gonna be vital for our success in the World Cup.
Tough. He's tough too. A lot of people don't think about that with him, but he gets by in the NBA. He's not the most athletic guy, so and this is why sometimes I think people try to call him cheap, because he's in there working hard, right? He's pushing and pulling and elbows, and he has to. That's the way he's going to survive in the NBA. So he's not going to be intimidated. He's not going to be pushed around in FIBA, and it's a battle in the paint in FIBA. And I think some players aren't used to it. And I think he's fully prepared and used to it, and is going to be fine with it.
And he's like a legit like 7 foot. Like I was there at training camp. Like he was way taller than Dwight Powell, and Dwight Powell's our center, right? So that's something that he brings. And I noticed it today. Like he got a bunch of like kind of tightly contested rebounds at the end of that game that they can play well. They have 4 shooters on the floor with Powell, right? And that kind of, they still don't lose too much on the rebounding end. So that's kind of something else that he brings to the team. So before we wrap up this podcast, and thanks again, guys, for doing this, I really, really appreciate it. Just predictions, like how far do you think this team goes? Do they get a medal? And I just want to go kind of person by person in this podcast, and just give a prediction of where you see them ending up. It can be like, oh, they make the quarters, but they miss out, but they make the Olympics. Just kind of have fun with it. So Matty, you can go first if you want.
Tough. I've tried to think about this, just seeing this current team, but coming off the 2 overtime wins versus Germany and Spain, and not really showing too much on our side. And being the supporter of the program and loving it for years, I will say this team makes the quarters and we qualify for the Olympics. And I'll just leave it at that for me.
For me, I just want to make it clear to people that this is a medal contending team, but we have a ridiculously difficult path to get there. So it is not unrealistic for Canada to get knocked out in the first round. All it takes is a crazy game against Latvia and a loss to France, and we're done. But that being said, I think this team could do it. Wins on Spain's home floor and Germany's home floor are very interesting, and it shows we're right there with the top teams in the world. Maybe we have more of advantage in a neutral setting. I'm going to say this team makes it all the way to the semifinals, loses to the United States, and then wins the bronze medal.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm gonna be kind of devil's advocate here. Not because like I'm not cheering for them or anything like that, but I think I've always just been kind of a more cautious person. And so I do think they're gonna make it out of the group. And I think it's definitely a real possibility that they make it through the quarterfinals, like beating one of France or Spain. Um, but yeah, just given the history, I can't say it with like any like conviction that they're gonna do it. Um, and it's not because I don't want it to happen, but it's just I'd rather be wrong and see them do a deeper playoff run, or so not playoff run, deeper tournament run. Um, so yeah, I think there's a good chance they do make it through the quarterfinals, but I wouldn't be surprised if um, they get stopped and it's another heartbreak, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think what we have to realize is like, again, these games are tight. And are they 50-50 versus Spain? Is it 50-50 versus France? Even if it's, let's say I'm off of a high of the win today and it's 60-40 in Canada's favor, that's still, lower odds to get that far. And you're going to have a similar challenging game in the quarterfinals, probably against Australia or Germany, maybe Slovenia, but those are the three teams that we would probably cross over. So that's just win after win after win against some of the top teams in the world. The probability and statistics behind that are not overly favorable.
And
Yeah, but
go,
yeah, I
Chen.
was just gonna say, yeah, I think yeah, we do have the tough draw, and I know Dominican Republic is kind of looking really, really strong. And I think that's my biggest fear, especially with their draw and, Karl Anthony Towns and then Gene Montero, Lester Quinones. Like, I'm just really worried about that. But I think given the talent on the team um, and everything, I mean, this has to be the year. This has to be the year that we qualify for the Olympics. Um, yeah, this has to be the year. I don't really know
You
what
stole
else
it
would happen.
out of my kind of breath, because I was going to ask you guys, it like, does at the end of this tournament, is Canada with that kind of banner, that ticket that says I almost said Tokyo, I said Paris 2024, is that something that you guys think by the end of the tournament that Canada will be finally at the Olympics after 24 years of waiting, and Steve Nash can hug RJ Barrett, his godson, and sing Kumbaya?
I'm saying yes.
I sure hope so. The luck of Canada basketball, it's got to be broken at some point. So let's just say this is going to be it.
Well,
Yeah, agreed.
I definitely think it will be. Well, I don't want to say definitely, because we've gone through everything, and I have to be pessimistic to some degree as a guy that started following this team in 2015, and that was fun. But I think if I'm going to give my 2 cents, I think they'll split the 2 games against Spain and France. I think that's probably what's most likely. They're probably, as Scott said, they're probably 50-50 or 60-40, but I just think I have a feeling they'll split those 2 games, and then making the quarters will then be on a knife's edge. And if it goes their way in points differential, then I think they make the Olympics. And if not, then they probably don't. But I do think they'll do very well. And I feel very confident now. I know Scott is wary of the Latvians. I feel very confident they make it out of their group and then have a decent chance against Spain or Brazil or whoever to kind of push through to the quarters. But I just want to see the Dominican and on that side of the draw and how that shapes up, because on talent, I'm not worried about this team being good enough to kind of qualify if it was in a vacuum. But unfortunately, FIBA is annoying, and draws don't make sense, and Canada got the wrong side. So yeah, well, thanks so much, guys, for taking the time and doing this. This was awesome. Hopefully we'll leave on more optimism, because this team is really exciting. And I'm sure they'll be awesome to watch, and they have a game tomorrow as well, and I'll do a quick postcast of that tomorrow for the Weekend Ball podcast. But thanks so much, guys, for taking the time and doing this, and getting everyone, the dream team, as I said, all in one place and on one podcast. So thanks so much for listening, and thanks so much for coming on, guys.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah,
Alex,
thanks for having me on.
Thanks for having us, man. Appreciate it.